Hello everyone and welcome to the channel All Kinds of Short Stories. Today we have created a top 5 serial killers from Romania. Criminals have existed since ancient times and their stories have become among the best known. We do not yet have concrete answer to the question why does a murderer kill. However, we can say with certainty that they have their own way of choosing their victims and their own signature. All over the world, serial killers have managed to shock and install horror in the places where they attacked. Romania has not been deprived of them either, and the stories of the most famous Romanian serial killers still manage to terrorize the world. Number 1. Iancu Barilla, the killer of bakers. Iancu Barilla was born in Galați, and his deeds during the Second World War marked him in history as one of the worst criminals. The individual had an imposing stature and a fierce face, which puts fear in you just at a glance. His favorite victims were bakers, and he is listed as the killer of the bakers. Its mode of operation was always the same. It analyzed its victims, found out where the bakers kept their money, and attacked at night. He killed cold-blooded 20 bakers. He was caught and sentenced for life to forced labor. After a while, he managed to escape from prison, but was caught while he was preparing to attack again. Even to this day, it is not known why he prefers to kill bakers. People unknowingly took his name using the expression like Barilla when they want to highlight an extraordinary effort. In reality, however, the use of this phrase means nothing more than resemblance to one of the most heinous criminals in the history of Romania, according to Știu.ro. Number 2. Ion Rimaru, the terror of the 70s. Ion Rimaru was born on October 12, 1946, being the eldest of 3 brothers. His father was an extremely violent man. He used to beat his wife often. In the end, the couple broke up and Floria Rimaru moved to Bucharest. Later, in capital, his son Ion followed him. Ion was a child with problems since childhood. He was repeated in the school several times, had sex with a minor daughter of the teacher, and at 18 was imprisoned for theft. At the age of 20, he was admitted to the Faculty of Veterinary Medicine in Bucharest, but he never managed to complete it. He kept repeating the years, here and there, and the teachers could never explain how he managed to pass the entrance exam, as they described him as a semi-illiterate. His roommates avoided him because he behaved strangely. When he gets angry, he was harming himself. More than 20 cuts were found on his legs and hands. In April 1970, Rimaru began its series of attacks. In 1 year, he assaulted 40 women in various ways. He killed 4 of them and raped the rest. Then he was nicknamed the Vampire of Bucharest. The police, finding the killer they were pursuing, committed his acts with violence and sadism, accustomed to bite his victims and suck their blood. When committing the deeds, Rimaru used a hammer, an axe, an iron crowbar, and a knife. He attacked waitresses who were walking alone on the street when they finished their service, and only after midnight when the weather was bad. Although many of Ion Rimaru's victims survived, the settlement of the case also came from a murdered woman. Under her body was found a medical certificate issued in the name of the murderer. At the trial, Rimaru tried to prove that he was mentally unstable, and because of this he was not responsible for the crimes, but the judges were not convinced. His mother said she was worried that her son had inherited his father's violence. Finally, Ion Rimaru is sentenced to death. On October 23, 1971, he was taken to Jilava, where he was to be executed. He was tied to a pole and began to struggle, shouting that only his father was guilty of what he had done. Ion father, Floria, died a year after his son's execution. His body was taken to the Forensic Institute of Bucharest for an autopsy. Following the analysis, it was discovered with astonishment that Floria Rimaru was the perpetrator of 4 crimes with unknown perpetrator dating back to 1944, according to hunedoarea.libera.ro. Number 3. Floria Rimaru, Eradication of Crime. This was the father of Ion Rimaru. The years of the last World War were without a doubt extremely turbulent for all European countries. The shortcomings and atrocities of the war had led to an unparalleled resurgence of crime, and Romania also had its sad representatives. It was 1944 when a series of murders shook Bucharest. In 1 year, 5 women had been brutally killed, and the fingerprints collected by the authorities of the time did not match those of the criminals in the database. It was therefore an individual with no criminal record. However, time has passed and the killer has never been identified. The mystery came to light again in the 1970s when Ion Rimaru's series of murders terrified the entire capital. To the surprise of forensic scientists, the fingerprints of the killer were identical to those of the 1944 murderer. But how could that be possible? More than 25 years had passed since those crimes, and the offender should have been elderly, a possibility ruled out by the authorities from the start. However, the mode of operation and commission of the crimes were almost identical. The notoriety of the Rimaru case and the arrest of the dreaded murderer would once again throw away the famous fingerprints of the war. A strange coincidence, however, he managed to answer the questions that had existed for so many years. Exactly 1 year after the execution of Ion Rimaru on September 23, 1972, the body of a man who had fallen from the train was brought to the Institute of Forensic Medicine. Examining it revealed a shocking detail. The fingerprints of the man who died in the bizarre accident coincide with those of the murderer from 1944. He was none other than Floria Rimaru, the father of the most famous assassin in the history of Bucharest, according to businessmagazine.ro. Number 4. Vasile Kaczuk, the butcher from Iași in the 1930s. Vasile Kaczuk managed to set the Iași police on fire after committing several robberies. While he was under arrest for one of these acts, several bodies were found under the floor of his house. The interwar offender, the man of Basarabian origin, was hiding a terrifying secret. Dozens of people had died. Before beginning his series of crimes, he made a special axe which would not slip out of his hands and with which he took the lives of the victims. The irony of fate was that in 1935, the Kaczuk bodies were discovered. He was in police custody, but not for murder, but for robbery. One day, after being arrested, the new owner of the building where Kaczuk lived had discovered the great secret of the criminal. Under the floor of the house where Vasile Kaczuk lived, he discovered 6 corpses, which had been brutally killed with Kaczuk's personalized axe. The butcher did not admit to committing the crimes, but gave up after being confronted by 2 of his former concubines. Things got even more shocking when Kaczuk confessed to police that in addition to 6 victims found in his former home, he had killed 20 other people, including a child. Of the 26 crimes, only 21 could be proven. The rest of the bodies could not be found. Kaczuk was shot dead while trying to escape while rebuilding a crime according to the Știrea de Iași.ro. Number 5. Vera Renzi, the Black Widow. It all starts in 1903 in Bucharest when a family of an influential Hungarian businessman and a young woman who was part of the Hungarian nobility in Romania gave birth to a beautiful and healthy girl named Vera. After her mother dies, the little girl remains in her father's care. The years passed and Vera's childhood in Bucharest was getting sadder and sadder. After turning 30, Vera and her father moved to the family estate in Berkerkul, Serbia's town. After a few years, Vera falls in love with Karl Schick, an influential Austrian banker, with whom she marries and has a child named Lorenzo. Everything changed the moment Vera becomes suspicious that her husband is cheating on her and Karl suddenly disappears. Vera informs her relatives that her husband left her without saying anything, then begins to mourn for a year, convinced that her husband is dead, although no one has ever proved it. After a while, Vera begins to be courted by Joseph Renzi, a rich nobleman, known in the world for his beauty but also for the large number of mistresses and lovers he had. Because they got along with each other, the two fall in love irretrievably, and after a very short period of time they decide to get married. However, this could not happen while she was still married to Karl. Thus, Vera goes to the police and declares that Mr. Schick died in a car accident in Bucharest a year ago. For the simple reason that the woman was part of a respected family, the authorities do not investigate this. Finally, Vera is free to marry Joseph and become Mr. Vera Renzi. Shortly after his marriage, Joseph resumed his work as Casanova of Vienna and repeatedly cheated on his wife. When she finds out, Joseph suddenly falls ill and falls into bed, suffering from an unknown disease. After a few months, during which time no one knew anything about the two of them, Vera is seen mourning again. Without a trace of Joseph, the world is content to assume that he is dead, and the threshold of Vera's mansion begins to be crossed by countless men. Most of the men she brought to the mansion were foreigners who occasionally came to Vienna, and for almost 10 years it is said that almost 30 men crossed the threshold of her house. At one point, however, Vera falls in love again, and this time with a Serbian banker named Milorad, 20 years older than her, and he was married. In order to spend more time with Vera, he reminds his wife that he is going to a business trip. But the days go by and Milorad does not return home. His wife finds out that Milorad was not on a business trip but was at his mistress' mansion in Berkerek. She goes to the police where she declares him missing and gives the police this information. Investigators go home to Vera where they find her alone. She admits that she was Milorad's mistress and tells the police that when she found out he was married, she will end the relationship and ask Milorad to go back home. However, Milorad's wife was not convinced by Vera's testimony and begins to investigate the disappearance of her husband alone. She discovers that Vera's first two spouses have disappeared without a trace, never proving their deaths. Besides, her son Lorenzo couldn't be found either. With this new evidence and information, the banker's wife returns to the police station and convinces the investigators that she must return to the mansion and resume the investigation of the case. The police start searching the mansion where they find nothing. The only place left unexplored was the family crypt in the courtyard, locked with a key that Vera had in her possession all the time. Asked to accompany them to the crypt and open the door, she realizes that she has no escape and complies. Investigators discovered 35 zinc coffins in the crypt, arranged in a circle, and in the middle of the circle was an armchair with a table on which were a candlestick with candles and a glass of champagne. Each coffin had a label with the name of each occupant written on it. Vera had poisoned both husbands with arsenic, as well as the other man who stopped on her doorstep, including Milorad. Shocking was the fact that in one of the coffins was her son, whom she killed because he had found out about the crypt. Asked about the chair and the champagne table in the middle of the circle, she admits that she had the strange satisfaction knowing that she was the last woman in the life of these men, and often went down to the crypt to drink a glass of champagne and talk to the ghosts of those killed. He had been doing this for 15 years. The case was unprecedented in the empire until then and will be called the Black Widow case. Vera is being prosecuted for the murder of 35 people, which make her the most prolific serial killer Romania has ever had. She is sentenced to death but escapes because in Yugoslavia at that time, women could not be executed and instead she is sent to prison for life. However, it does not last long there, because she was in the habit of constantly talking to the victim's ghosts. She was declared schizophrenic and transferred to a mental hospital. She lasted there until 1916, when at the age of 57 she died of a stroke. For forensic scientists, Vera Renzi became a case of study and is included in the Black Widow typology of heterosexual serial killers to get satisfaction based on the effect, according to travelwithmatei.com. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to share, subscribe, like, comment, and support the channel in any way you like. Leave a comment and let me know what do you think about the videos and what other types of content you may want to see. Thank you. Bye.